My daughter scornfully declared that I'd get nothing from my ex-wife's $40 million will, just a pathetic loser who abandoned his family. She sat in a lavish office certain of her victory, but then the lawyer read one sentence. Viv smiled. That moment changed everything. Welcome back to Dad's Revenge. I'm glad you're here with me today. If these stories of family loss and starting over mean something to you, a like and a subscription go a long way toward keeping them coming. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you in the comments when someone wrongs you and then reaches out years later. Are you the kind of person who opens the door again? Or do you believe some bridges are better left unbuilt? There's no wrong answer. Now, a note before we go further. Some details in this story have been shaped for the purpose of storytelling, and any resemblance to specific real people or events is purely coincidental. It's the truth at the heart of the story that matters most. That's all you're getting here. Cassandra's sharp whisper landed on me before I'd even lowered myself into the leather chair across from her. 20 years since we'd last had a real conversation, and that was her opening line. She never lifted her eyes from her phone designer heels clicking against the marble in measured, deliberate beats. Cassie, please don't call me that. Her voice could have frozen the Pacific, visible through the floor-to-ceiling glass of the 38th floor. And don't pretend there's anything between us. I tugged at my old suit jacket, suddenly conscious of every worn thread. This office announced wealth without apology. Windows stretching from floor to ceiling, abstract art that probably ran more than my Fresno apartment equipment I couldn't begin to name. Cassandra belonged here, fitted perfectly in that black designer dress, makeup immaculate, despite the occasion of her mother's will reading. Ned Albright cleared his throat, aligning documents with the quiet precision of a man who had guided families through grief many times before. His lined face carried real sympathy as his gaze moved between us. "Coffee, Mr. Kendrick, please." My voice came out rougher than I'd meant it to. Cassandra finally glanced up, her eyes running over me with barely disguised contempt. "Yes, let's get through this farce. I have a meeting at 5. Your mother left very specific instructions for how this should proceed." Ned said, his manner professional, yet warm. He'd been Vivian's attorney for decades, had watched our family climb and then come apart. She was always meticulous about business matters. The words slipped free before I could pull them back. Cassandra's head shot up, anger burning in eyes that were unmistakably her mother's. "Don't speak about Mom in past tense like you actually knew her. You left, remember?" The accusation settled over the room like smoke. My hands cracked and roughened from years. On construction sites trembled faintly as I reached for the coffee cup. Outside, a helicopter swept past its rotors, catching the light of the afternoon. "Shall we begin?" Ned's gentle interjection felt like a rope thrown to a drowning man. He opened the leather portfolio, the documents crisp and exact. Vivian had always loved her paperwork, every detail mapped and accounted for. Even now, she was directing things from beyond reach. Cassandra settled back, radiating the ease of someone who already knew how this ended. And why wouldn't she? Vivian had built an empire after our divorce. The coffee shops, the property holdings, the stock portfolio. Naturally, all of it would flow to their daughter. Mrs. Kendrick left very detailed instructions about the sequence of this proceeding. Ned went on, glancing at me with what might have been pity. "It's essential we follow the order she specified." A pigeon settled on the window ledge outside its small eyes, seeming to take inventory of the room. Vivian had always said pigeons were persistent creatures that never let go of what they were after. Perhaps that's what had powered her after she left our life behind. My throat felt dry in spite of the excellent coffee. 20 years of silence, and now this room. Why had she included me at all? The mutual friends who'd broken the news of her death had been puzzled as well. Cancer, they'd told me, 6 months from diagnosis to the end. Ned cleared his throat and began. "Your wife left very detailed instructions about..." But his voice seemed to blur at the edges as my mind slid back to that phone call a week ago, the one that had upended everything again. I'd been crouched under the kitchen sink in my small Fresno apartment, wrestling with a leaky faucet when the phone rang. "Mr. Kendrick, this is James Albright. I represented your ex-wife Vivian." Represented. Past tense. The word arrived like a punch I hadn't seen coming. "She passed away yesterday. I'm calling because you're mentioned in her will." The wrench had dropped from my fingers and clattered into the basin. 20 years of nothing, and now I was stepping back into her life through legal paperwork. The mutual friend who'd told me about her illness months earlier had seemed as bewildered as I was. Why now, Viv? I'd breathed into the empty apartment. After all this silence, why now? The rooms felt tighter after I hung up. 2 bedrooms in a complex built in the 80s, furniture from thrift stores, everything serviceable and worn. Such a distance from this marble and glass palace where I now sat, watching Cassandra turn magazine pages with studied indifference. Can we just start already? Cassandra's voice cut through my thoughts. I have a meeting at 5. She didn't look up from the fashion magazine. Every turned page was a declaration of boredom. Designer, everything shoes, handbag, the works. Vivienne had clearly made certain their daughter never lacked for anything. Your mother left very detailed instructions, Ned repeated patiently. It's important that we follow the sequence. I dragged a hand across my forehead, trying to stay present. The week since that phone call had dissolved in a haze. 3 days to arrange leave from the construction site, 2 days to drive down from Fresno, 1 day to locate clothing passable enough for this room. My supervisor had been decent about it. Death in the family, even an ex-family, earned a measure of grace. She was always meticulous about business matters, I said again, a memory of Vivienne's color-coded filing systems, surfacing without invitation. Cassandra's head came up sharply, fury flashing in her expression. Don't talk about Mom in past tense like you knew her. The accusation stung because it was earned. I hadn't known her, not the woman she had grown into. The Vivienne I'd married was a dreamer who talked about running a small bookstore. This Vivienne had built a coffee empire, held property across 3 states, invested in stocks whose names I couldn't even pronounce. The helicopter passed again, its steady hum threading through the city noise 38 floors below. I thought about my modest apartment, my truck with 180,000 miles, the quiet life I'd assembled after she asked for the divorce. No bitterness in that request, just a calm certainty that we'd moved in different directions. Different directions. That was how she'd put it. Not, I don't love you anymore. Not, you're not enough. Just different directions, as if we were 2 trains pulling out of the same station onto separate tracks. But she had remembered me in her will after 2 decades of Christmas cards with no return address. Birthday gifts for Cassandra routed through go-betweens. Total silence otherwise. She had thought of me at the end. Ned shuffled more papers, glancing my way now and then with quiet sympathy. He'd known us in the better years, had drafted the divorce papers with a professional gentleness. Vivienne had been fair even then, taking nothing that wasn't already hers. The magazine pages snapped as Cassandra flipped through them faster, her impatience filling the space between us. She almost certainly assumed this was a formality, that I'd receive some small token while she collected the real inheritance. Why would she think otherwise? Vivienne had rebuilt everything without me. My cracked hands looked out of place against the polished conference table. 45 years of physical work left their marks in ways no amount of lotion could undo. Cassandra's manicured nails caught the light as she checked her phone again. Every movement a quiet broadcast of success. Then her sharp voice pulled me back. Well, are we doing this or not? But her words about not knowing her mother had stirred something deeper, something old. Suddenly, I was 25, again back in that university library where I'd first set eyes on Vivienne, bent low over her books, entirely lost in whatever she was reading. The library smelled of aged paper and open futures. Vivienne was at the corner table, surrounded by stacks of business textbooks, her blonde hair lit by the afternoon light, angling through the tall windows. She wore a simple green cardigan and jeans, nothing elaborate yet. Something about her complete absorption caught me and held me. I'd been shelving books as part of my work-study shift when she looked up and found me staring. Are you gonna help or just stand there holding that book? The smile she wore pulled the sting right out of it. I looked down at the volume in my hands, Principles of Retail Management, then at the tower of similar texts beside her. Business major, double major, business and communications. She gestured to the chair across from her. I'm Vivienne, and you're the one who's been reorganizing the poetry section. How did you know that alphabetical by author instead of those bizarre subject groupings? Much better system. She closed her textbook and gave me her full attention. I'm Garth, by the way. Nice to meet you, Garth, by the way. We talked until the library shut its doors that night. Dreams and plans, the whole future spread open before us, like a story still waiting to be written. She wanted to weave her 2 loves together, literature and business. Maybe a bookstore with readings, coffee, a gathering place for the neighborhood. Garth, Ned's voice drew me back to the conference room. Are you ready to continue? Cassandra had stopped pretending to read her magazine and was watching me with narrowed eyes. Is he having some kind of episode? I'm fine, the words came out hoarse. Just remembering. Well, stop remembering and start listening, Cassandra snapped. Some of us have actual lives to return to. Ned cleared his throat with diplomatic care. Perhaps a brief moment before we proceed with the reading. No moments. Cassandra's voice could have scored glass. Read the will, give him whatever token Mom left out of guilt, and let's move on. Token? She was certain I'd received something minor, something symbolic. Maybe she was right. Maybe Vivienne had left me a book or some piece of furniture from the life we'd once shared together. A gesture toward an ending. Nothing more. But then why the elaborate setup? Why the specific instructions about sequence and procedure? Vivienne never did anything without careful planning. The leather portfolio lay open on the table, official documents bearing gold seals and dense legal language. 20 years of separation, and it all came down to these papers. Whatever Vivienne had decided would reshape both our lives, though Cassandra couldn't see that yet. Your mother's instructions were quite specific about the order of disclosure, Ned said carefully. She wanted certain things explained before others. Explained. Cassandra's voice climbed a register. What needs explaining? She leaves me her estate, maybe gives Dad some keepsake, and we're done. Ned's expression suggested it wouldn't be that simple. He'd known Vivienne longer than either of us had. He'd watched her grow from that dreaming college girl into the builder of a business empire. If anyone understood her final moves, it was him. The pigeon returned to the window ledge, bold as ever, staring into the room as though it had a personal stake in the proceedings. Vivienne would have laughed at that, would have said something about persistence and stubbornness being virtues. She was always 3 steps ahead. I murmured more to myself than anyone. What was that? Cassandra demanded. Your mother always planned carefully thought through every angle. You wouldn't know. You weren't there. The accusation settled between us, true and painful. I hadn't been there for the business triumphs, the property deals, the stock moves. Hadn't been there when she fell ill, when she sat down and made these final decisions. But I'd been there at the start, when dreams outweighed bank balances and love counted for more than profit margins. I'd been there when she was still Viv, not Vivienne, when her laugh could fill any room, and her faith in the future was something you could almost hold. Ned drew out the first document, every movement measured and deliberate. Whatever came next would change everything. I could feel it in the heaviness of the silence, in Cassandra's sudden stillness, in the way the afternoon light lay at a long slant across the marble floor. The last will and testament of Vivienne Rose Kendrick. Ned began, his voice weighted with finality. Cassandra's accusation about my absence pulled me back to that raw morning at the cemetery, where she'd made it devastatingly plain I wasn't welcome at Vivienne's final farewell. The Chevy Malibu looked almost embarrassingly out of place among the Mercedes and BMWs crowding the La Jolla Cemetery parking lot. Palm trees stirred in the ocean breeze as I moved along marble pathways, white carnations held in my weathered hands. Vivienne had always preferred simple flowers. The security guard checked my invitation twice, plainly doubtful that someone like me had any business at this gathering. Vivienne's business associates had clustered near the graveside in expensive black attire, their designer sunglasses catching the California sun. I found a spot beneath a palm tree far enough back to pay my respects without drawing notice. The priest's eulogy cast Vivienne as a visionary entrepreneur, a devoted mother, a pillar of the community. All of it true, and none of it the woman who used to laugh at old movies and make animal-shaped pancakes on lazy mornings. That was when Cassandra spotted me. She crossed the marble walkway like someone marching to a confrontation, her designer black dress probably worth more than a month of my rent. Every eye tracked her approach, murmurs spreading through the assembled mourners. "What are you doing here?" Her voice carried over the manicured lawns. "You have no right to be here." The priest faltered mid-sentence, visibly uneasy with the scene unfolding at his carefully arranged service. Vivienne's business partners turned to stare, expressions ranging from idle curiosity to open distaste. "Cassie, I was with your mother for 25 years and left when things got hard." She gestured sharply, her voice rising with each word. "Don't embarrass these people with your fake grief." The mourners shifted some, pulling out phones to record the scene. This was not the dignified farewell Vivienne would have wanted, but Cassandra seemed past caring about propriety. "I came to say goodbye, that's all." You should have said goodbye 20 years ago. Her laugh was hard and short. Look around, Dad. See all these people. They were here for Mom when it mattered. Where were you? I wanted to tell her about the Christmas cards I'd sent that were never answered, the birthday gifts that came back unopened, about phoning the hospital when I heard she was sick only to be told visitors weren't welcome. Instead, I stood quietly holding my simple flowers while elaborate arrangements surrounded Vivienne's casket like a fortress built of guilt and money. And don't expect anything from the inheritance. Cassandra continued, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper that somehow carried farther than her shouts. Mom left everything to people who actually cared about her. The security guard edged closer, ready to step in if needed. Vivienne's associates watched with the fixed attention of people rubbernecking, a collision horrified, unable to look away. Her words about the inheritance hit harder than the public humiliation. I'd never cared about money, but the assumption that I deserved nothing stung as though 25 years of marriage could simply be canceled out by 20 years of silence. The priest cleared his throat, trying to reclaim control of his service. Cassandra shot him a look that could have stripped the bark from those palm trees, then stalked back to her place among the mourners, leaving me alone beneath the swaying fronds. I set the carnations on a side table and made my way back to the Malibu, feeling every judgmental stare burn into my back. As Ned's voice drew me back to the present conference room, I found myself wondering whether she'd been right to write me off so completely. Let me read the official provisions of Vivienne Kendrick's last will and testament. Ned's formal voice cut through the memory, pulling me back to this moment of reckoning. Cassandra straightened in her chair, that familiar self-assurance resettling across her face. She'd probably already mentally refurnished the Lake Arrowhead house, mapped out vacations funded by her inheritance. Her phone lay forgotten on the marble table, all focused now on Ned's methodical handling of the documents. Cassandra Kendrick receives the Lake Arrowhead house and the sum of $300,000. What? Cassandra's voice cracked slightly. That's all? Ned read on, his professional tone steady, despite the interruption. Contingent upon working at the company for 3 years, under whose supervision? Cassandra half rose from her chair, gripping the table's edge. Who's running Mom's company now? The helicopter swept past the window again, its rotors beating in rhythm with my suddenly hammering heart. Something in Ned's expression, careful, almost apologetic, made my stomach clench with a dread I couldn't name. Garth Kendrick receives 51% of Kendrick Organic Industries, including all subsidiary companies, real estate holdings, and investment portfolios valued at approximately $12.7 million. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. The color drained from Cassandra's face, her knuckles white against the dark table surface. My own hands had gone numb, the coffee cup slipping slightly in my grasp. That's not possible. Cassandra's whisper barely reached across the table. Mom wouldn't. She couldn't have. Ned set down the document, genuine sympathy now showing in his face. I'm afraid it's quite legal and binding, Cassandra. Your mother was very specific about these arrangements. I sat staring at him, mouth dry, struggling to take in numbers that felt unreal. 12.7 million. A controlling stake in Vivienne's empire. The woman who'd asked for a quiet divorce because we'd grown in different directions had left me everything she'd built without me. She was sick. Cassandra's voice climbed toward hysteria. Mom wasn't thinking clearly. This is insane. The pigeon returned to the window ledge, tilting its head as if genuinely drawn to the human drama unfolding inside. Vivienne would have laughed at that, would have remarked that birds make shrewder judges of character than most people do. Cassandra pushed to her feet and moved to the windows in tight, agitated strides. There has to be a mistake, some kind of clerical error. Mom built that company after Dad left us. She would never hand it back to him. Your mother was entirely lucid when she made these decisions, Ned said carefully. In fact, she left specific instructions on how to handle any challenges to the will. My throat felt constricted, the marble walls seeming to press inward around me. Construction worker to multimillionaire in the span of a single legal reading. It felt like winning a lottery I'd never entered, collecting a prize I'd never wanted. How long ago, I managed? How long ago did she write this? The final version was signed 6 months ago, Ned replied, though the basic structure dates back nearly 3 years. 3 years. While I was swapping out broken windows and patching leaking roofs, Vivienne was quietly rewriting her legacy. While Cassandra was living her comfortable life, counting on an inheritance she considered settled, Vivian was laying the groundwork for this earthquake. Cassandra spun from the window, her designer dress swirling around her legs like dark water. He manipulated her. Somehow he got to Mom when she was vulnerable. "Cassie, don't you dare call me that!" Spittle flew from her lips, her careful composure finally showing cracks. "Not now, not ever." Cassandra's stunned silence stretched for what felt like far longer than it was. Then something dangerous surfaced in her eyes, the same look she'd carried at the cemetery, but sharper now, more concentrated. When she finally spoke, her voice was ice cutting through the office air like a blade. "What I'm about to share next changed the entire shape of that room, and of everything I thought I understood about the years we'd lost. Before we get there, I want to ask you something. If you discovered that someone you once loved had been quietly working against you the whole time, would you say your piece out loud, or would you choose to let your actions speak instead?" He manipulated Mom. She was sick, couldn't think clearly. She gestured wildly at me, her perfectly manicured hands trembling with rage. Look at him living in some tiny apartment driving that piece of junk car. Of course he'd sweet-talk his way back into her life when she was dying. I sat without moving, letting her fury break over me like a wave. 20 years of separation, and she still cast me as the villain of her story. "Cassie, I haven't even spoken to your mother in 5 years. Don't call me Cassie. You lost that right." Her voice hit a pitch that seemed to make the glass hum. "You lost every right when you walked away from us." Ned cleared his throat diplomatically, reaching for something beneath the conference table. Perhaps this will clarify Mrs. Kendrick's mental state at the time of these decisions. He set what looked like a laptop carefully on the marble surface, his movements precise, and rehearsed the actions of someone who had prepared for exactly this moment. "Your mother anticipated there might be questions about her competency." His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced ease. She recorded this message specifically to address those concerns. The room's lights dimmed on their own as a projection screen descended from the ceiling, modern technology pressed into the service of the dead. Vivian reaching across the grave to direct this moment just as she'd directed everything else in life. Cassandra stopped pacing, her face drained of color in the artificial dusk. "What is this?" "Your mother's final message," Ned said, simply pressing a key. Vivian's face filled the screen, pale but resolute, propped against the pillows of a hospital bed. She wore a simple blue robe, her gray hair drawn back in the no-nonsense style she'd adopted in her final months. But her eyes were sharp alert, unmistakably present. "Garth," she said, and I found my hand reaching toward the screen without meaning to. "If you're watching this, I want to thank you for coming today, despite everything that's passed between us." Cassandra made a small, choked sound. "No, Mom couldn't have," Vivian's recorded voice pressed on, calm and measured. "I know Cassandra will have questions about my mental capacity, about whether I was manipulated or coerced into these decisions. I want to make it absolutely clear that I am of sound mind and body, or as sound as this cancer will allow." The hospital room behind her was unmistakably real. IV stands monitoring equipment, the institutional furniture that announces a medical facility without apology. But Vivian's voice was steady, her gaze direct and unwavering. "These provisions represent my own choices made after careful consideration and extensive consultation with my legal team. No one has influenced these decisions except my own conscience." Cassandra sank into her chair, as though her legs had stopped working. "But why would she—" Vivian's image flickered faintly on the screen as she drew a labored breath. "Garth, there are things I need to tell you about our marriage, about the mistakes I made that I never found the courage to admit while I was alive. I need to tell you about the betrayals, about how money turned me into someone I no longer recognized." Cassandra made a small, strangled sound, but Vivian's recorded voice pushed forward with the resolve of someone who knew this was her final chance to speak the truth. "I had affairs, Garth. Multiple affairs with business partners, investors, anyone who could help me climb higher." Her image shifted slightly as she adjusted her position in the bed. "You suspected, didn't you? That's why you went so quiet in those last months before you left." My hands clenched the chair's armrest until my knuckles went white. 20 years I'd wondered whether I'd been paranoid, whether my creeping suspicions had been nothing but groundless jealousy. And now, from beyond the grave, Vivian was confirming what I'd been too frightened to confront. "Cassandra, you inherited my beauty but not my soul." Vivian's gaze on screen seemed to find our daughter directly. You got the surface success, the material wealth, but Garth always understood the real value of things. I forgot that. Mom, no, Cassandra whispered, tears cutting through her flawless makeup. The coffee shops were built on lies, sweetheart. Contracts secured through bedroom negotiations, partnerships bought with betrayal. Garth deserves that company more than anyone because he helped build it through honest work before I corrupted everything we'd created together. I felt tears pressing behind my eyes, but held myself steady. This was what I'd waited 20 years to hear. Not a formal apology exactly, but acknowledgement. Proof that I hadn't been the failure she'd made me feel like. Vivian coughed on screen, the sound harsh and wet, pulling us back to the reality of what we'd lost. I'm giving Garth control because he stands for the values I abandoned. He'll know what to do with the business, whether that means running it with integrity or selling it and beginning again. Ned reached into his briefcase and produced a sealed envelope, handling it with quiet respect. Your mother also left this personal letter, he said, breaking the seal with deliberate care. He cleared his throat and began reading in Vivian's own words. Dear Garth, forgive me for losing myself in the pursuit of wealth and status. You tried to hold us together while I was busy pulling us apart. The company should have always been ours, not mine. Viv. The name left my lips like something released after a long time held in. The letter continued through Ned's steady voice. You were the anchor I cut loose because I believed I could sail farther without you. I was wrong about everything except your character. Take what I built and make it worthy of the man you remained when I could no longer stay the woman you married. Cassandra sat frozen, staring at her mother's image on the screen as though she were looking at a stranger. The perfect world she'd constructed, built on the foundation of a saintly mother and a worthless father, was giving way with every revelation. Vivian's recorded voice grew thinner but more urgent. Garth, don't let Cassandra's anger poison what's left of our family. She's more like me than I ever wanted her to be, but there's still time for her to choose a different path. The video ended with Vivian reaching toward the camera, as if trying to bridge the distance to the people she knew would be watching. Her hand held there for a moment, then the screen went dark. Ned closed the laptop with a soft click. The silence between us stretched like a bridge neither Cassandra nor I knew how to cross. I felt Cassandra's eyes on me, waiting. For the first time in 20 years, I had something I needed to say to my daughter. I didn't leave you, Cassie. I left what we had become. The lies, the betrayals, the poison that was working its way through all of us. Cassandra's face crumpled for just a moment before hardening over again. She rose abruptly, designer heels clicking against the marble as she moved toward the door. I need air, she said, not looking back. The door shut behind her with enough force to rattle the window where that stubborn pigeon still sat watching. Ned and I remained in the wreckage, Vivian's confessions settling around us like dust after a demolition. Your wife carried a great deal of guilt, Ned said quietly. She spent the last year reworking that while looking for a way to make things right. She didn't need to give me anything, I answered, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. Hearing the truth was enough. 5 minutes passed before Cassandra came back, her expression remade. The raw emotion was gone, replaced by a calculated smile that reminded me uncomfortably of Vivian in full corporate mode. Dad, she began settling into her chair with studied casualness. Maybe we should talk privately, work out some arrangement that actually makes sense for both of us. We can talk here. I have no secrets. Her smile widened, but I could read the calculation sitting just behind it now. Vivian's revelations had taught me something about spotting masks. You have to understand you're behind the times. Cassandra went on, her tone patronizing but dressed in false concern. Modern business is complicated. Digital marketing, social media management, supply chain optimization. It's not like the construction work you're used to. I nodded, letting her continue. Mom's company needs someone who understands contemporary markets, who can speak to investors and board members. No offense, but pulling up in that old Chevy isn't going to inspire much confidence. Ned watched our exchange with quiet attention, one hand resting protectively on the legal documents. You're probably right, I agreed. I don't understand modern business the way you do. Cassandra's smile turned genuine for the first time since we'd sat down. Exactly. So we could work together, you take a silent partner role, collect your dividends, and I handle the day-to-day operations. Everyone comes out ahead. Maybe I don't need to understand it. I continued holding her gaze. Maybe what the company needs isn't someone who knows how to game social media or charm a boardroom. Maybe it needs someone who remembers why it was started in the first place. The smile slipped. Dad, be realistic. You're 70 years old. You've been out of business for decades. The employees won't respect you. The clients won't trust you. You'll run Mom's life's work into the ground. Your mother's life's work was built on lies and betrayal, I said quietly. Maybe running it into the ground would be the honest thing to do. Cassandra's careful composure cracked like expensive veneer peeling off rotted wood. You can't be serious? That company employs hundreds of people. You destroy all their livelihoods out of some misguided sense of justice. I didn't say I would destroy it. I said maybe it would be honest to admit what it really is. Her forced smile began to give way as she realized her usual charm wasn't landing. Something dangerous flickered in her eyes, the same look she'd inherited from Vivienne in her worst moments. Cassandra's manufactured smile dropped entirely as she began moving around the room like something cornered. This washed-up ex-husband has no right to Mom's company. She declared to no one in particular. The mask was fully off, now revealing the calculating operator underneath. Her movements turned sharp aggressive, every trace of daughterly warmth abandoned. I'll challenge this will in court, she announced, spinning to face Ned. Mom was clearly not in her right mind. Cancer medications, emotional distress. Any judge will see she wasn't competent to make these decisions. Ned opened another file with practiced calm. I have medical records from 3 separate psychiatric evaluations confirming your mother's full mental capacity at the time the will was prepared. Then she was coerced, manipulated. Cassandra's voice pitched higher with desperation. He must have reached her somehow, played on her guilt about the divorce. The will was drafted by 3 independent attorneys and witnessed by a notary. Ned continued without flinching. Your mother explicitly requested those precautions to prevent exactly this kind of challenge. Cassandra grabbed her phone fingers unsteady as she scrolled through contacts. My lawyer will find a way to challenge this. There are always technicalities, procedural errors, something. Feel free to consult with counsel, Ned replied, a layer of steel beneath the professional courtesy. However, you should be aware that your mother also included a countersuit clause. Anyone mounting a frivolous challenge to the will forfeits their inheritance entirely. The phone slipped from Cassandra's grip, landing with a sharp crack on the marble table. She wouldn't have, her voice barely carried across the room. Your mother was quite thorough in her planning, Ned confirmed. She anticipated every possible challenge and prepared accordingly. Cassandra turned to me, her eyes wild. You don't even want it. You said yourself you don't understand modern business. Why are you taking everything I've worked for? Cassie, I'm not taking your future away. I'm reclaiming my past. Your past? Her laugh came out closer to a sob. You walked away from us. You abandoned your family for 20 years. Now you show up and expect to inherit what Mom built without you. Your mother built it on the foundation we laid together, I said quietly. She just lost sight of that for a while. Ned cleared his throat with diplomatic precision. Perhaps this is a good moment to mention the employment clause in the will. Cassandra's head snapped toward him. What employment clause? Your inheritance is contingent upon working for the company under Mr. Kendrick's supervision for 3 years. The position carries a competitive salary and the opportunity to demonstrate your value to the organization. Work for him. Cassandra's voice broke with disbelief. Take orders from a construction worker who doesn't even own a decent car. Or forfeit your inheritance entirely, Ned confirmed matter-of-factly. Cassandra looked between us, her composure in ruins. Her shoulders dropped as the full weight of her situation finally settled in. The empire she'd expected to walk into had become a job application she wasn't sure she wanted to fill out. Without another word, she moved to the door, her steps mechanical, drained of fight. As it closed behind her, the silence felt different, not hollow, but full of something. For the first time in hours, I could hear my own breathing, could feel the enormity of what had just happened taking root in my bones. Ned moved quietly around the conference table, organizing documents with the practiced ease of someone who'd guided many families through moments like this. He didn't speak. He could tell I needed room to take it all in. I crossed to the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped behind my back, looking out at the Pacific stretching toward the horizon. 38 floors below, traffic moved in its orderly way. People heading home from work with no idea that a 70-year-old construction worker had just become a multi-millionaire. I don't feel triumph, Ned. The words came out barely above a whisper. Just sadness. Justice doesn't always bring joy, Garth. His voice was gentle. Sometimes it only restores balance. Vivian's face on that hospital screen kept replaying in my mind. The woman who had betrayed me, dismantled our marriage, built an empire on manipulation and half-truths, and then spent her final months trying to undo the damage. How do you hold love and grief for someone at the same time? On Ned's desk, tucked between legal folders and business cards, sat a small frame photograph. Cassandra, at maybe 8 years old, gap-toothed grin pigtails perched on Vivian's lap at what looked like a company picnic. Before everything fell apart. Before money and ambition got into the water and poisoned the whole well. She was a good kid once, I said, touching the frame lightly. She still could be. Ned's tone carried cautious optimism. People can change even at 45. What do I do with all this? I don't even remember how to run a business. You'll have help. Vivian arranged for a transition period. Experienced managers, financial advisors, a complete support structure. Ned pulled out another folder, thick with organizational charts and the contact lists. She thought of everything. The pigeon appeared at the window ledge, again bold as ever, sizing us up with those small, dark eyes. Vivian would have laughed at that, would have said something about persistence being its own reward. Can we meet tomorrow? I asked, the full weight of the day pressing down on me all at once. I need time to think through everything, figure out what comes next. Of course, 9 a.m. I nodded, then paused on something that had been turning over in my mind during Cassandra's legal outburst. Ned, about the employment requirement, the 3-year clause. What if we made it more than just a penalty? What if we built in real chances for her to learn to grow? Not just serving time until the inheritance clears, but actually becoming someone who earns it. Ned studied me for a moment. That's generous, given how she treated you today. She's my daughter. Family isn't something you walk away from, even when they walk away from you. Moving toward the door, I felt the weight of it settling on me, the responsibility of it. Hundreds of employees whose livelihoods would depend on what I did next. Cassandra's future resting on decisions I hadn't asked to make. Vivian's legacy waiting to be either redeemed or run into the ground. I shook Ned's hand, his grip steady and sure. Thank you. For protecting Vivian's wishes and for standing firm when I couldn't stand up for myself. It's been my privilege, Garth. Viviana chose well. As I reached for the door handle, I had no clear picture of what came next. The drive back to Fresno would give me space to think. But first, I needed to sit somewhere quiet and work out who I was supposed to be now. The familiar creak of my apartment door felt like stepping into a different era. 3 hours ago, I'd been a struggling retiree. Now I held a controlling stake in a multi-million-dollar company and had no idea what that meant. The drive up Interstate 5 had gone by in a blur of processing and planning. The Malibu's radio playing quiet country music, while my mind ran through possibilities and obligations. Every mile between San Diego and Fresno had felt like moving further from the corporate world and closer to the plain life I'd built from the wreckage of my marriage. My evening routine started on its own. Kettle on the stove, reaching for the porcelain teapot Vivian had given me for our 20th anniversary, one of the few things she'd let me take when we parted, probably because she'd already moved on to finer things. While the water heated, I pulled the photo album from the shelf above my reading chair. Pages of memories I hadn't turned in months, maybe longer. There, the grand opening of our first coffee shop, Kendrick's Brew. Vivian radiant in a simple white sundress, me, in my best suit. Cassandra perched between us in a miniature apron that read, "Future Boss." We'd believed in something then. Not just the business, but each other. The future had looked as wide open as Cassandra's smile in that picture. "I guess you understood it all too late, Viv," I whispered to the image, tracing Vivian's young face with a roughened finger. The tea was ready. I settled into my worn reading chair, the same spot where I'd sat with the divorce papers 20 years ago, where I had read about Vivian's business wins in trade magazines, where I had mourned the family we might have been. The spiral notebook lay on the side table, pages filled with work orders and grocery lists and stray thoughts about life past 70. Tonight, I wrote about justice and responsibility, about inherited empires and lost daughters. The phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed Ned's number. "Ned, about tomorrow's meeting. I want to talk about what's possible for Cassandra. A pause. Are you sure after everything she said today she's my daughter? You don't walk away from family. What were you thinking? I looked at that photo again. Three people who had loved each other before. Ambition and betrayal ground everything to dust. Real partnerships, not just the bare 3-year minimum, but genuine chances to grow and contribute something that mattered. Maybe she can find her way back to the person she used to be, and if she won't, at least I'll know I left nothing on the table. After hanging up, I sat with the photo album open in my lap, studying those faces, letting the old laughter come back to me. Cassie learning to pull coffee at age 10, perched on a wooden crate behind the counter. Viv teaching her the business, back when the business still meant something. Community good coffee, not stock options and market share. Forgiveness isn't really about them, I realized. It's about me, about choosing hope over bitterness, about refusing to let a cycle of hurt poison one more generation. I reached for a sheet of my simple stationery, the same kind I'd written on for 40 years. If Viv could summon courage for hard truths in her final days, I could find the courage to reach out to my daughter one more time. Walking into Ned's office the following morning felt like stepping into a different world entirely. The day before, I'd been on the defensive. Today I was building towards something, not just for myself, for Cassie too, if she'd allow it. "You look better," Ned said, pouring from some expensive machine that probably ran more than my monthly rent. "I feel it," I told him, clearer. I took the cup and held it with both hands. About Cassandra, I want to build something real for her. Division head roles, strategic planning, genuine responsibility with room to grow into it. Ned raised an eyebrow. "That's a generous instinct, but will she see it that way? Maybe not right away. But I'll know I did everything I could." We spent 2 hours working through company structure, financial projections, employee profiles. Viv had truly thought of everything. Transition teams, training programs, mentorship frameworks. She hadn't just built a business, she'd built a blueprint for putting something broken back together. The documents felt weighty and final as I signed them. Garth Kendrick, majority owner of Kendrick Organic Industries. The signature looked foreign to me, like another man's handwriting. "There's one more thing," I said as we gathered to leave. "I want to write Cassandra a letter, something personal, not a corporate memo, an invitation to rebuild what we lost." After the meeting, I drove out to Coronado Beach, needing salt air and some quiet before heading back to Fresno. The Pacific unrolled endlessly to the west, each wave erasing footprints and leaving the sand clean for whatever came next. Viv had loved this beach. We'd brought Cassie here when she was little, building sand castles and chasing pigeons. Back before success crowded out everything else, before betrayal moved in, where trust used to live. The evening light was thinning when I finally settled at the kitchen table with the letter I'd begun the night before. "Dear Cassandra." I wrote slowly, each word deliberate. "I want to restore more than the company. I want to restore our family. Your mother's final gift wasn't money. It was the possibility of a new beginning." The pen moved steadily across the familiar stationery, offering partnership, where I might have offered punishment, hope, where I might have offered resentment. I told her about the opportunities I wanted to open up, the real authority she could earn, the relationship we might yet rebuild if she was willing to try. "I know you're carrying anger," I went on. "You have every right to. But anger doesn't have to be the end of the story. People can change even when that seems like an impossible thing to believe." The family photograph sat beside my writing pad. 3 people smiling at a cafe opening 25 years ago. Before it all came apart. Before we lost sight of what mattered. "I'll be here when you're ready," I wrote to close. Whether that's tomorrow or next year or never. But the door stays open. I sealed the envelope and addressed it carefully to Cassie's La Jolla address. Ned would see that it reached her along with the formal business proposals and the employment contracts. True inheritance isn't money, I thought, looking at our family photo one last time. It's the chance to begin again, to choose love over fear, to build a bridge instead of a wall. I set the pen down and looked at the 3 of us at that cafe opening, smiling, believing in tomorrow. Maybe we could find our way back to that. Maybe Cassandra would surprise me. That's where Garth's story leaves me, sitting quietly with a sealed envelope and a family photograph, wondering if a door left open is enough. It takes something out of a person carrying 20 years of silence and suspicion, and still choosing in the end to write a letter instead of a verdict. I believe God doesn't waste the painful seasons, not the betrayal, not the loneliness, Not even the humiliation at that funeral. Every one of those years shaped the man. Garth became someone who could hold power without cruelty and offer forgiveness without forgetting what it cost. This is what I'd want a friend to take away from a family revenge story like this one. First, don't let someone else's dishonesty turn you into a version of yourself you won't recognize later. Your integrity is the one thing they can't inherit. Second, when the truth finally surfaces, let it settle before you speak. The clearest decisions come after the noise dies down. Third, an open door is not the same as a surrender. You can offer reconciliation and still hold your ground. Fourth, real inheritance isn't what gets divided in a lawyer's office. It's the example you leave behind. That's what Dad's revenge really means to me, not a score settled, but a standard kept. If this story moved you, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Leave a thought in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you haven't yet subscribed to Dad's Revenge so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.